Hello everyone, this is GamesWithFrank and welcome to tutorial 3 of the Cozy Exploration with Unity and Playmaker series. This time we'll be looking at how to make a coin system in the game, and I have Inkscape open, which is a little bit different from the other tutorials. So if you are not familiar with Inkscape, or if you're not interested in creating the sprite that we'll be using for the coin system, if you're not interested, you can skip to the time frame that I mentioned on the screen right now, and you can go to the development part. So I'll just make a square. I used my R key to draw rectangles, and it would usually snap with the page. And you can set the page by going to document properties by holding Ctrl Shift and D, and it would open up this window. And once you have that, you can select pixels here, and you can mention something like 256 by 256, and you can draw your square here. And if I go to and if I control and drag, you can see that we can create this star looking thing, and I'm gonna just scale it down. I'm using Control and Shift for scaling it down proportionately, and I'm gonna duplicate it and blur it so that it has that like glowy effect on it. And I think this should do for our current setup. So once that's done, I can just open Unity. I just open the same scene, and if I go to resources, textures, I can open this in the Explorer. And if I copy this directory, I can just export it to that. And we'll be needing this for the coin pickup particle system. So once we have that, we'll just create a coin. We'll just use the cylinder from Unity's default meshes. So I'm gonna quickly grab one cylinder, and I'm gonna scale it down in the y-axis. I think we can add a sphere collider for the main coin, and I'm gonna keep it like that for now. And I'll just quickly add a particle system. I'm gonna decrease the speed to 0 and increase the shape a little bit, maybe that much. And before we assign the material, we'll just quickly create a particle material here. I'm gonna call this star. If I go to URP and particles lit, that should do it. And I can just assign the base map. So once we have that, we can just say from grayscale, so it would make the black alpha. So once we have that, we can just assign whichever color we need, and make sure you change the surface type to transparent and disable the preserve specular lighting. So once we do that, we can just go into the particle system and go to renderer and assign the star. So we don't need these many stars to show up for the particle system. Let's just say like we need a maximum of 4, and the lifetime, let's go to size over lifetime and enable that one. I think this curve would do perfectly, but also we need color over lifetime, which I'll just enable. And if I open the gradient editor, I'll create one point here, and if I select the alpha here and blend it, you can see that it's much more smoother. And we also need that for the beginning, so I'm gonna add one point here and alpha 0 when it begins, so it will fade in and fade out seamlessly. So once we do that, we can also change the rotation over lifetime. I'm gonna set this to 180. I'm gonna increase the lifetime to 2, and so I think that should do it for now. We can improvise on this and make a better particle system later on. What you could also do is create another particle system which would have only one, like with 0 speed, and I'm gonna reduce the radius to that much, and I'm gonna increase the size a lot. We like that much, and this is going to be the same color which we'll be using for the other one. but I'm gonna reduce the alpha a lot more to make it very subtle, something like that. Now it looks a little bit more mystical. I'm also gonna quickly add a global volume. So I'll go to the hierarchy, right click, volume and global volume, and I'll create a new volume profile. And if I add, let's say, bloom and enable everything and increase the intensity, so I think that should pretty much be okay. But I feel that the number of particles is too much. I'm going to reduce it to 2. I think that should do it. And once we do that, we can just add a quick FSM to the coin and make sure that the peer collider is set to is trigger. And I'll call this coin collection. And I'm going to call this wait for trigger. And I'm going to use trigger event and wait for the player. Once I have that, I can just transition into state 1, and in state 1 I'll say collect coin. And for this one, we'll need a small UI, which I will be making based on the actual Nightstone UI. So I'll just open up Inkscape. I'm gonna just change this to sprite, 2D and UI, and single. And once I do that, I can create a UI image, and if I press Ctrl Shift Alt and then select the top right corner, it would snap to that particular corner. So I can just press F on my keyboard to focus on the image that we just created, and I'll just assign this one. And I'll just call this coin collection, and I'll quickly add a text mesh pro, and I'll be using the same color which we are using here and increase the size of it, and I can have it centered both in horizontal and vertical. I'm gonna keep it at 0, and let's change this name to coin text. Let's just create an empty game object called game manager, and this will be recording our score and calling events. So I'll just quickly add an FSM here and call it initialize. So if there are any variables that we need to set at the start of the game, we can do it here in the game manager. So I'm gonna set the variable called coins, and it's gonna be an int, and this will be 0. And if we want to increase it, we should be able to do it only through the game manager. So that way we have limited access to this one. So right now, if we are going to change the number of coins, we'll be sending an event. So let's say add coin, and this will be a global event. And global events can be accessed from any other game object. So I'm gonna add a state and call this coin added, and global transition add coin. So here we are going for the game object reference for the UI that we need to animate. So I'm gonna call this coin collection UI and change the type to a game object, and change the take the input so that we can access it from over here, and this will be an output because we need to see how many coins are being collected easily. So if I select the coin collection and drag it into the coin collection UI, now we can access that here. So if you search for tween UI, you can find tween UI position, and if I look at the coin collection UI's position, if I set it to X and if I take it off screen, it's coming to around 260. So I'll just keep it at 260 right now, and we need it to change from the current position to an offset on the x-axis to minus 260. So it would move minus 260 and then it would animate, right? So I want this to be a ease in out quad. You can experiment with the other types of curves here, and I want it to animate in 0.5 seconds. So once I do that, you can also add the add int action, and here we're going to add 1 coin, and the same way we'll be accessing the text here. So I'll add another variable. If I go to the variable tab and say coins text and make it an input, make it a game object. So once you have the ecosystem browser, you can just go to add-ons ecosystem browser, and that would open up this window. So I've installed the TextMesh Pro package from the ecosystem. Now if I go to the game manager and delete this one, and I want to set text, if I search for set text, it should show me this particular action which was not there before. So if I specify game object, and so you need to search for this action, then you can assign the variable here, and once you do that you can set the text to whichever you want, and that is going to be converted from the coins int variable, and we are going to set it only once. Tween position, it's gonna, so we are going to tween the UI, and once it's done it's gonna wait for a little bit, and I'm gonna copy the same action, and this time it's gonna be plus 260, and this will have a delay of let's say 3 seconds. This will make a variable actually. I'll just call this wait time, and I'm gonna make it an input so that we can change it here. So once that is done, it would go back to the idle state. This is fade out, something like that. We'll just save the scene, and once we have that, you can go to the coin, and when you see collect coin, you can send an event, and here I'm gonna change it to game object FSM and specify game object, and this is going to be the game manager, and I'm gonna click and drag that one here. You can make it a variable completely, but for now we'll just test this one, and I'll set the send event to add coin, and once that is done, tween scale, local scale to 0, and this will, yeah, I think 1 second will do, and once that is done it will destroy the game object. So I'll just quickly go to the coin and duplicate it. I'll put one here, I'll put one here, and I'm gonna save and hit play. And you can see that the system is working properly. It would show the number of coins that you've collected, and it would automatically animate the UI back. So I think that's working properly. So that's it from me. This is GamesWithFrank signing out. I'll see you in the next video.